Welcome back, everyone. It's time for another deep dive into the latest cybersecurity headlines.
And we got a lot to unpack today.
Yeah, we do. We've got everything from medical devices to police surveillance. Ransomware gangs are getting faster and more aggressive.
It's a wild world out there.
Let's jump right in and start with a story that really takes us back in time. Security expert Ben Rothke told a story like Bruce Schneier consulting on medical device security.
Interesting.
This was way back when Schneier was with BT. The funny thing is Schneier himself doesn't even remember the details.
Wow. So this story has been kind of lost to time.
But it brings up a really important point. Medical device security has been a concern for a long time.
Yeah. You know what's crazy? Vulnerabilities can linger for years. They can pop up again with new and even more dangerous exploits.
Like a digital ghost story?
Exactly. And this connects to another story we've been following, the resurgence of that XCSET malware. It's targeting macOS developers.
It's a reminder that old threats can come back to haunt us.
We need to be aware of the history of vulnerabilities, not just the latest headlines.
Speaking of things that have been around for a while, let's talk about surveillance. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, or EFF, launched a new tool called the Atlas of Surveillance.
I've heard about this.
It documents the use of police surveillance technology across the U.S.
Things like facial recognition and license plate readers?
It's a bit unsettling to think about. It makes you wonder, how does this impact privacy and civil liberties?
It's a big question, and it's not just a U.S. issue. The implications are global.
This atlas feels like a wake-up call for everyone?
We need to be having conversations about transparency, accountability, and the potential for misuse.
Absolutely. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about a more proactive approach to security. This article we found really dives into continuous threat exposure management, or CTE.
I'm familiar with that concept.
The author argues that relying on traditional security measures like periodic vulnerability scans isn't enough.
I agree. The threat landscape is constantly evolving.
CTM emphasizes ongoing risk assessment and proactive mitigation.
That's right. You need to constantly monitor for weaknesses and address them before attackers can exploit them.
It makes you wonder, though, how many organizations are actually using a CTM approach?
That's a good question. I'd say many organizations are still struggling to implement it effectively.
I imagine things like budget constraints and the need for skilled personnel get in the way.
You're right. There are often practical barriers, but the takeaway here is that the old set it and forget it security mindset just doesn't cut it anymore.
Agreed. All right, let's take a quick break from the serious stuff. This next story is about AI, and it's a bit, well, you'll see. Episode 38 of the AI Fix podcast explored some pretty wild AI developments.
Oh, I love that podcast.
They talked about AI that's proving time travel is impossible.
Really?
But apparently this AI still can't draw human hands accurately.
That's hilarious.
Then there's a robot dog with arms.
Okay, that's getting a little creepy.
And an octopus pretending to be a glove.
I don't even know what to say to that.
It's a wild ride. I love how the hosts of the AI Fix inject humor and skepticism into their discussions.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to not get too caught up in the pipe.
Not every AI development is a game changer.
We need to look beyond the headlines and critically evaluate the real-world implications.
Exactly. Speaking of real-world implications, let's get back to the threats that are actively targeting us right now. This one hits close to home for anyone using Microsoft Teams. There's a phishing campaign specifically targeting Teams users.
Oh no, I use Teams every day.
It's orchestrated by a group called the Storm 2372 Gang. They've been operating since August 2024. They're exploiting device codes in Teams invites.
Wow, that's sneaky.
It's a new tactic that's proving to be pretty effective.
So what can we do to protect ourselves?
Be cautious with any unexpected invitations or links, even if they appear to be from a trusted source.
Good advice. You can never be too careful.
Now, for a story that highlights how the ransomware landscape is changing at an alarming pace, new research shows that ransomware gangs are shrinking the time they give victims to pay ransoms.
I read about that. It's scary.
The average time to ransom, or TTR, is down to just 17 hours.
Some groups are demanding payment in as little as 4 to 6 hours.
It's a drastic shift from the old tactic of lingering in a network for days or weeks.
It seems speed is the new weapon of choice for these attackers.
So what does this mean for organizations?
They need robust incident response plans. Early detection and swift action are crucial to minimize damage.
Every minute counts.
This shift towards faster attacks mirrors what we're seeing with the increasing attacks on password managers.
It's all about efficiency and quick profits for these attackers.
Sadly, yes.
Next up, we have a headline that should grab the attention of anyone using Amazon Web Services or AWS. It appears there's a new ransomware attack, specifically targeting AWS S3 buckets.
Oh, wow. That's concerning.
We don't have all the details yet, but the fact that it's targeting S3 buckets suggests a potentially devastating attack.
Those buckets often hold sensitive information, mission-critical data backups.
They're like digital treasure chests for attackers.
If you use AWS, I highly recommend checking out the full article on CSO Online.
They're known for publishing in-depth technical analyses.
Knowledge is your best defense.
Let's move on to a story that reminds us that sometimes the methods attackers use are just as fascinating as their objectives. Researchers have uncovered unfinished Russian malware that utilizes Telegram for command and control operations.
That's intriguing. Why Telegram?
Well, Telegram is known for its popularity and end-to-end encryption.
I see. That makes it much harder for security researchers to detect and track malicious activity.
It's like trying to find a needle in a digital haystack.
And the fact that this malware is still under development is concerning.
We could see even more sophisticated versions using Telegram in the future.
It's something to keep an eye on.
Speaking of things making a comeback, remember that story about Bruce Schneier and the medical device mystery?
Yeah, what about it?
Well, we have another case of old malware returning with new tricks. XCSET, a Mac-focused malware first discovered back in 2020, has resurfaced.
Oh no, I thought that was gone.
It's back with enhanced capabilities designed to evade detection and infect systems.
How is it spreading?
This time it's spreading through infected Xcode projects.
So they're targeting developers.
That's right, Xcode is essential for building apps for Apple devices.
This is a supply chain attack.
It allows the malware to potentially compromise the security of numerous apps on the App Store.
That's a big deal.
It highlights the increasing sophistication of macOS threats.
Mac users are no longer immune to malware.
And the attacks are becoming more advanced.
We need to be vigilant about the sources of our code and the tools we use.
For our final story in this segment, we're going to shift gears and talk about what happens after a breach. This article offers advice for Chief Information Security Officers, or CISOs, on how to rebuild trust.
That's an important topic.
After a security incident, trust can be shattered.
Absolutely.
The article emphasizes transparency throughout the entire incident lifecycle.
That makes sense.
Open and honest communication is crucial from the moment a breach is detected to the aftermath and recovery. The article also stresses the importance of conducting thorough postmortems.
To learn from the incident?
These postmortems should focus on accountability, but with sensitivity towards the individuals involved.
It's a delicate balance.
We need to learn from mistakes, but also recognize that security incidents often result from complex system failures.
Not just individual negligence.
There's also a strong emphasis on supporting cybersecurity teams to prevent burnout.
That's crucial. These teams are often under immense pressure.
We need to provide them with the resources and support they need.
And recognize their efforts.
Finally, the article stresses the importance of rebuilding customer relationships after a breach.
That can be a long and difficult process.
Data breaches can erode customer trust.
And lead to churn.
Organizations need to proactively address customer concerns and demonstrate their commitment to security.
It's about showing that you value your customers and their data.
This ties back to our earlier stories about ransomware. Even if an organization survives an attack, the damage to its reputation can be lasting.
That's a good point. A security breach can have far-reaching consequences.
It's a stark reminder that cybersecurity is about more than just technology.
It's about people processes and the trust that binds them together.
Well said. Let's take a quick break and then we'll be back with more cybersecurity news.
Sounds good. Yeah, it really can impact an organization in so many ways.
Let's talk about a story that shows just how fragile our trust in online systems can be.
Okay.
This research from Pika Security is pretty alarming.
What did they find?
They're seeing a huge increase in malware that targets login credentials.
Oh, wow. That's not good.
They call it info stealers, and they're becoming more and more common.
So basically malware that steals your usernames and passwords.
Exactly. They found a threefold increase in malware targeting credential stores.
Which includes things like password managers and login data saved in your browser.
Right. It's ironic. We're told to use password managers to be more secure, but now they're becoming a prime target for attackers.
It seems like everything has a downside.
The convenience of password managers often comes at a security cost.
It's a trade-off for sure.
And to make matters worse, these attacks are becoming increasingly automated.
So they can target more victims with less effort.
Exactly. It's a numbers game for them.
They cast a wider net and increase their chances of success.
So what can we do to protect ourselves?
Well, using a password manager with strong encryption is a good start.
Anything else?
Look for password managers that offer zero-knowledge architecture.
What's that?
That means even the provider can't access your data.
So it's like having your own personal vault.
Exactly. And of course, enable multi-factor authentication wherever possible.
That adds an extra layer of security.
Right. And never underestimate the importance of strong, unique passwords.
And being vigilant about phishing attacks.
Absolutely. Layering your security measures is key.
Okay, let's move on to a story about a new family of data-stealing malware.
Oh, this sounds interesting.
This one's particularly tricky because it abuses the Microsoft Graph API.
I'm not familiar with that. What is it?
It's a tool that gives developers access to resources on Microsoft's cloud.
Including things like Microsoft 365.
Exactly.
So how is malware exploiting it
The malware essentially hijacks this legitimate tool to steal your data.
and avoid detection?
It can capture Graph API tokens, which give attackers access to your Outlook account.
And potentially other Microsoft services?
It's a reminder that attackers are always looking for creative ways to exploit the tools we rely on.
It's a constant cat and mouse game.
What makes this even more challenging is that this malware also bypasses hashed passwords.
That's bad news.
It uses techniques to essentially render those passwords useless.
So even if you have a strong password, you're still at risk.
It's a prime example of living off the land tactics, or LLMs.
What does that mean?
It means the malware uses legitimate tools and processes that are already on your system.
To carry out its malicious activities?
Exactly. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
It blends in with normal system operations, making it harder to spot.
The researchers who uncovered this malware have released detection rules to help security professionals.
That's good to know.
But for everyday users, the best defense is awareness and vigilance.
As always.
Now let's shift our focus to Germany.
Okay.
The websites of the Bavarian state government were recently hit by a cyber attack.
Oh, wow. Who was behind it?
It's believed to be pro-Russian hacktivists.
So a politically motivated attack?
They targeted the state chancellery and the state ministry for digital affairs.
Those are pretty high-profile targets.
The attack caused some temporary disruption, but luckily no data was lost or encrypted.
That's fortunate.
Even though the impact was minimal this time, it serves as a reminder that government institutions are increasingly becoming targets.
Especially for these types of politically motivated attacks.
It's a concerning trend.
Governments and organizations need to be prepared.
Okay, let's move on to an article that discusses a more proactive approach to cybersecurity.
All right.
It revisits the concept of continuous threat exposure management, or CTEM.
We talked about that earlier.
It's all about shifting from a reactive to a proactive security mindset.
Constantly monitoring and mitigating threats.
The author emphasizes going beyond basic vulnerability scans and compliance checklists,
Organizations need to continuously assess their risk profile
identify potential attack paths.
and implement proactive security controls.
It sounds like a lot of work.
It is, and the article acknowledges that organizations face barriers.
Such as
Well, one of the biggest is the lack of skilled cybersecurity professional.
the cybersecurity skills gap.
It's a major problem.
What else?
Another challenge is the complexity of modern IT environments.
With cloud computing, mobile devices, IoT devices,
It's difficult to get a comprehensive view of an organization's attack surface.
and of course the threat landscape is constantly changing.
Attackers are always coming up with new techniques.
It sounds like a tough battle.
It is, but despite these challenges, the author emphasizes the importance of a proactive cybersecurity posture.
It's no longer a question of if you'll be attacked, but when.
The best way to minimize the impact is to be prepared.
Let's look at a story that sheds light on how ransomware gangs are changing their tactics.
Go ahead.
We've talked about how they're giving victims less time to pay ransoms,
Right.
but this story reveals another trend:
What's that?
an increasing reliance on data exfiltration.
So they're stealing data before encrypting it.
Exactly. It gives them more leverage.
Even if a victim can restore their data from backups?
The attackers can still threaten to release sensitive information.
That's a double whammy.
It adds another layer of complexity and urgency to these incidents.
Organizations now have to worry about data recovery and potential data leaks.
It's not just about getting your data back anymore.
It's about protecting your reputation and mitigating the broader impact of the attack.
This story also highlights the growing role of initial access brokers, or IABs.
Who are they?
They're individuals or groups that specialize in gaining unauthorized access to networks,
And then selling that access to other cybercriminals.
including ransomware gangs.
So they're basically providing the keys to the kingdom.
It makes it easier than ever for attackers to gain a foothold in target networks.
This emphasizes the need for strong authentication and proactive threat intelligence.
Let's turn our attention to a story about how attackers are exploiting seemingly harmless features.
I'm all ears.
This time it's the Microsoft Teams platform.
Oh no! What happened?
A cybercriminal group known as Storm 2372 is exploiting device codes in Teams invites.
What are device codes?
They're typically used for legitimate purposes.
Like signing into Teams on a new device.
Right, but attackers have figured out how to weaponize them for phishing attacks.
That's clever.
They can trick users into granting them access to their Teams accounts.
And then steal information, spread malware, launch further attacks.
It's another example of attackers finding ways to turn our tools against us.
What can we do about it?
Be cautious with any unexpected invitations or links, even if they seem to be from someone you know.
Always verify the sender's identity.
Speaking of unexpected threats, let's talk about a story that shows that no operating system is immune to cyber attacks.
Okay.
XCS said, That malware strain that was targeting macOS users is back.
I thought we were done with that.
It's resurfaced with new and improved capabilities.
Oh, no.
And this time it's spreading through infected Xcode projects.
Xcode. That's for developers building Apple apps.
Exactly.
So this is a supply chain attack.
It allows the malware to infect a wide range of developers.
And potentially compromise the security of numerous apps on the App Store.
It's like poisoning the well at the source.
This highlights the need for strong security measures for both developers and end users.
Developers need to be vigilant about their code and tools.
And end users should only download apps from trusted sources.
Let's talk about another story about ransomware and how these gangs are evolving their tactics.
Okay.
We've already discussed how they're shrinking the time they give victims to pay.
Right. The average time to ransom is down to just 17 hours.
But this story focuses on another aspect.
What's that?
The increasing pressure they're putting on victims.
How so?
They're using psychological tactics to create a sense of urgency and panic.
To force victims to make rash decisions.
They might threaten to release sensitive data or harm the victim's reputation.
So it's not just about the money anymore.
It's about exploiting fear and desperation.
This makes it even more important to have a solid incident response plan.
And to stay calm under pressure.
Don't let the attackers dictate your actions.
Let's dive into a story that highlights a concerning type of attack.
I'm listening.
This one targets a fundamental building block of cloud computing, AWS S3 buckets.
S3 buckets, what are those?
They're online storage containers used by businesses and individuals to store data.
Oh, I see.
And they become a prime target for ransomware gangs.
Why is that?
S3 buckets often contain sensitive information, mission-critical data backups.
They're like digital treasure chests for attackers.
Unfortunately, many organizations haven't implemented adequate security measures.
So they're easy pickings.
While we don't have all the details of this specific attack, the fact that it's targeting S3 buckets is alarming.
It suggests a potentially devastating attack.
If you use AWS, I urge you to check out the full article on CSO Online.
They're known for their in-depth technical analyses.
Now let's turn our attention to a story that reminds us that the methods attackers use can be as interesting as their objectives.
I love these kinds of stories.
Researchers recently uncovered unfinished Russian malware that uses Telegram for command and control operations.
Telegram, the messaging app.
The one and only.
Why would they use that?
Telegram is known for its popularity and end-to-end encryption.
Ah, that makes it harder to detect and track malicious activity.
It's like trying to track a ghost.
And the fact that this malware is still under development is concerning.
We could see even more sophisticated versions using Telegram in the future.
It's a trend to watch.
Speaking of comebacks, remember that story about Bruce Schneier and the medical device mystery?
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Well, we have another case of old malware returning with new tricks. XCSET, the Mac-focused malware, is back.
Ugh, not again.
It's resurfaced with enhanced capabilities, and it's spreading through infected Xcode projects.
Xcode. That's for developers building Apple apps.
This is a classic supply chain attack.
Targeting developers to reach a wider audience.
It allows the malware to potentially infect a large number of downstream users.
This attack highlights a couple of things.
Like what?
First, the increasing sophistication of macOS threats.
Mac users are no longer immune to malware.
And second, the widespread impact of a supply chain attack.
We need robust security measures at every stage of the software development lifecycle.
From development to distribution.
Let's wrap up this segment with a story that shifts gears from specific attacks.
Okay.
This article offers advice for Chief Information Security Officers, or CISOs.
About what?
About how to rebuild trust after a security incident.
That's an important topic.
A security breach can shatter an organization's reputation.
And damage relationships with customers, partners, employees.
The article emphasizes transparency throughout the entire incident lifecycle.
That makes sense.
Open and honest communication is crucial.
From the moment a breach is detected to the aftermath and recovery.
The article also stresses the importance of conducting thorough postmortems.
To learn from the incident.
But these postmortems should focus on accountability with sensitivity.
It's about learning from mistakes without placing blame.
The article also highlights the need to support cybersecurity teams to prevent burnout.
These teams are often under immense pressure.
We need to provide them with resources and support.
And recognize their efforts.
Finally, the article emphasizes the importance of rebuilding customer relationships after a breach.
That can be a long road.
Data breaches can erode customer trust and lead to churn.
It's about showing that you value your customers and their data.
This ties back to those ransomware stories. Even if an organization survives an attack, the damage to its reputation can be lasting.
Cybersecurity is about more than just technology.
It's about people trust reputation.
Well said.
Cybersecurity is definitely a multifaceted issue. And this next story takes us to the intersection of cybersecurity, international relations, and national security.
Okay.
This article features some interesting thoughts from Liko Lange.
What does he have to say?
He's raising concerns about cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns.
Coming from where?
State-sponsored actors, particularly Russia.
That's a serious accusation.
Lange argues that Germany and Europe as a whole need to step up their defenses.
Makes sense. So what does he suggest?
Well, he's calling for a more robust cybersecurity infrastructure,
That's a given.
and he also stresses the need for closer cooperation between governments and the private sector.
A united front.
Exactly. He believes that's crucial for countering state-sponsored attacks.
I agree. These threats don't respect borders.
He also makes a point about accountability.
For these nation-states launching attacks.
Right. He suggests that a more assertive approach might be necessary.
To deter future attacks.
It raises some difficult questions, though.
Like what?
How do we define acceptable behavior in cyberspace?
And what are the appropriate responses when those lines are crossed?
It's like we're navigating uncharted territory.
We're still figuring out the rules of engagement in this new digital battleground.
It's a challenge that's not going away anytime soon.
Definitely not. So what can we take away from all these stories?
I think it's clear that cybersecurity is no longer just a technical issue.
It's a societal issue, an economic issue, a national security issue.
It's about protecting our data, our privacy, our infrastructure, our way of life.
It's about defending the very foundation of our digital society.
The threats are real, and they're constantly evolving.
But so are the solutions.
By staying informed, embracing a proactive mindset, working together, we can build a more secure future.
Keep learning, keep questioning, keep pushing the boundaries.
Well said. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into cybersecurity.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Until next time, stay safe out there, everyone.